Well, welcome everybody to Optometric Education Consultants National Webinar Series, Tuesday night edition. Tonight's unique and interesting topic will be Unlocking Your Genetic Potential, Nutritional Eye Health Edition, with Dr. Vittorio Mena, who is our guest speaker this evening. He's Sports Vision Director at Optical Academy in Clifton, New Jersey, and Chief Visionary Officer at Omniverse City. He also serves as a clinical director for Special Olympics, Lions Club's International Open Eyes programs for the state of New Jersey. He is awarded his professional degree from the Pennsylvania College of Optometry. In 2019, he was awarded the New Jersey Young Optometrist of the Year. In 2020, he received the Public Service Award from Drexel University. He also served 4 years in the AOA Sports Performance Vision Committee. He is a member of the Ocular Wellness and Nutrition Society. He's a regular monthly contributor to the Review of Optometric Business columns and is on the editorial board for Optometry Times. I want to ask everybody to give a nice, warm, virtual OEC welcome to Vito, who's going to take us through the next hour and 40 minutes. So with that, Vito, please take it away.
All right. All right.
Hey,
Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
Vito, before taking it away, I also want to give some kudos to you into your introduction is that, along with that list and the impressive and lots of committees, Vito is always at the national meetings. He's at the regional meetings. He's always there interacting. He's either there lecturing, participating as a key opinion leader, but he's also, I have deemed him the optometry's photographer, official photographer for optometry. He's always there taking pictures. He always posts them to Facebook. He brings a good vibe to the meeting. So Vito, thanks for doing that. And now please take it away. So.
All right. Yeah. Thank you again for that very nice introduction. All right. So hopefully some of you are back from the last lecture that I gave last year. So if you're back for round 2, then thank you to you guys. So these are my industry disclosures. Nothing that I mention is anything to do with these companies, but for Alcon, I do speak on their contact lens division. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but Bausch & Lomb has a nutrition division. So I'm on that side of the fence. But again, nothing I talk about has any relations to this. But to answer your guys' poll question, since I'm in New Jersey, I'm about 10 minutes from New York City. I actually got about 18 inches of snow. So that was how much I got. And yes, I've been to a New Jersey beach, many beaches actually. So here's a little bit about myself. Obviously, they already introduced me, but in my first year out of practice, or out of school, and when I started practice, I actually worked at the office that saw the New York Giants, which is the NFL football team. And all of these colleagues that you see here, these are actually our optometric colleagues that all do sports vision. And so these are people that I've learned a lot of information about sports vision. And so I share a lot of the things that I've learned from them, obviously from my own clinic, and then my passion in sports vision, nutrition, and things of that nature. So if you think sports vision is mostly for guys that you see in these photos here, well, think again. Well, Dr. Amanda Nancy, she was a past AOA president for the sports performance vision section. She's actually the team doctor for the Miami Dolphins, again, the NFL football team. And she's also is the team doc for Inter Miami, which is the team where Messi plays for soccer in Florida. So again, enjoy this lecture that I give to you guys. So, and when I was born in 1986 is when Medicare and Medicaid actually deemed or crowned us doctors of optometry. That's when we were actually given that award, let's just say. And as you know, AOA has been battling many times for different states of, are we considered an optometric physician? And now we know with the whole ordeal happening in Kentucky right now is another battle that we got to deal with. So we're always battling to keep our profession that doctor of optometry or optometric physician. So since we're here and we are considered optometric physicians, well, let's go back to the basics. What does it mean when we do medicine? So it's actually a Latin word, and medicine actually means physician. So the actual word physician is physica, which means things related to nature. And what does doctor actually mean? It means to teach. So that means if we want to call ourselves optometric physicians, that means our title technically means that we are to teach things related to nature. That is our job as a physician. And so that's what I'm going to be preaching about in this entire lecture, and hopefully it gravitates to you and also your patients. So Dr. Mehmet Oz, you guys know him as the Dr. Oz Show. He says that your genetics loads the gun, your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So pretty much what that means is that we are always thinking that whatever's in your genetics, that's your set in stone, but it's not necessarily the case. It's really the environment that you're in, who you're around, is what actually influences our genetics. And I'm going to get into that throughout this lecture. So if we go back to when we're in optometry school, right? Either it was orientation or at graduation, we had to say the optometric oath. So before the optometric oath, we had the oath of Hippocrates. So that was before Christ was born. It was in 480 BC is when that Hippocratic oath was developed. But we have the actual optometric oath. There's actually 9 categories of the oath, if you remember it. But to me, the most important to me is those 3 things that you see on the screen. So what does it say? It says, I affirm that the health of my patient will be my first consideration. Number 2 is I will advise my patients fully and honestly of all which may serve to restore, maintain, or enhance their vision. So look at the first word that it says. It says restore vision. So that means us as optometrists have the ability to restore somebody's vision. So how could we possibly do that besides giving them a pair of glasses? And then the third one is I will strive continuously to broaden my knowledge and skills so that my patients may benefit from all new and efficacious means to enhance the care of vision. So I don't know how many of people are on this call right now or lecture, but I truly thank you because you guys are actually doing what the optometric oath is doing. You are upping your skills in an area that's not really talked about to help not only yourselves, but also your patients. Well, let's go back in time, a history lesson. So we always think about Watson and Crick, who created the DNA helix, right? But it was actually Frederick Meissner, who was a chemist in 1869. He was the one that actually discovered nucleic acids of our white blood cells. Then in the 50s, they started using bacteria to prove that DNA actually transmits traits from one generation to the next. So the gentleman that you see looking up, that's Watson. The one on the right is obviously Crick. They're the ones that actually developed the DNA helix. The interesting part, though, is that when they were doing their research, they were failing many times, that their laboratory actually told them to stop doing the research because they kept failing. So what they did was they decided to not listen to them, decided to do research behind their back, somewhere other lab, and they actually developed the DNA, or they discovered the DNA helix. The actual more interesting part is that Watson actually just recently passed away 2 months ago. He was 98 years old. Crick passed away in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So I just thought that was a nice little thing. But when Watson was still alive in the 80s, he was actually claimed or deemed the director of the Human Genome Project, which we're going to get into in a little bit. So the first poll question, since Watson was in the human genome, he was the director of it, how many genes does the human body have? A, 25,000, B, 50,000, C, 100,000, D, 200,000. What do you think the answer is?
Okay, Vito, your poll is up and running. It will take about 20 to 30 seconds for people to weigh in, find it, start to weigh in.
All right, cool.
Joe, I'm assuming that there's probably not off this short runway that there's probably no questions.
Correct.
Good. And while we're waiting for that, do you know how many we have on by chance?
I don't. I think we're probably around 80.
Okay, great. Awesome. So to the 80 people, again, I thank you for that. I promise you this will be the best genetics class you've ever taken in your life. Hold me that to the grave because you're going to have to grade me to see how I do. And I'll tell you the reason why is because why I'm so passionate on this topic is before I went to optometry school, I got my master's degree in microbiology. During my master's degree, I was actually given the opportunity to not only, well, you have to be a TA, a teacher's assistant. I actually TA'd 6 different courses during my master's degree. One of them was genetics. And so I'm bringing all of the information that I did and spinning it in a fun way that actually is something relatable. And I'll get into that in a little bit.
Perfect timing. I'm going to display the answer. I'll go right down the line with percentages for you. 20%, 20%. Your winner at 37% is 100,000. And then 24% at 200,000. So
mostly C and D, right?
Mostly C and D.
All right, cool. So let's go on to the next slide. So for those of you, that is, you are technically correct. The reason why you're technically correct is because back in the early 2000s, they actually estimated that we had about 100,000 human genes. And out of those 100,000, 6 of them actually have been identified. Now, today, currently, scientists are saying that we only have anywhere between 19 to 30,000 human genes. Now, the crazy part is that, remember I told you, I got my degree in microbiology. We actually have more microbes than we actually have cells in our body. It's actually bacterial cells that we actually have. So our brain is made up of 100 billion neurons. Our body is made up of 70 trillion bacterial cells. So that means whatever we're eating and around our body is we're feeding our bacteria. It's really what goes on. It's the bacteria in our DNA that sets us apart and creates who we are. So that is the human genome. So now you know it's anywhere between 19 to 30. So the answer was A, 25,000. So if you can see there, the microbiome, which is found in your gut. So the gut and the brain is tied together via the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve number 10. It's the largest cranial nerve that we have in our body. That's why it's called the wanderer nerve. And so whatever you put into your body is going to go to your brain. And if you are eating unhealthy stuff, what's going to happen to your brain? It's going to deteriorate. And what's going to happen after that is going to potentially cause cognitive decline, like dementia and Alzheimer's, or age-related macular degeneration, or a whole bunch of other things, right? And so the goal, obviously, is to keep our bad genes awry, right? We got to keep the bad genes away and keep our good genes active, right? So let's go to the next slide. So if you remember, or back in your old school genetics days in undergrad, as you guys all know, in the computer world, they're run by zeros and ones. Well, our bodies are made up of purines and pyrimidines, and the genetic code is based on the letters that you get. So A, T, C, and G. So what happens is that each DNA that we have, DNA has about a 700 word code. So those letters, those A, T, C, G, those are the words of our DNA structure, and it creates the DNA helix, right? So we need those nucleotides in there to create our genetic being. So when I was a genetic TA, my job, or what I would instill in people's heads, was that all enzymes are proteins, but not all proteins are enzymes. So genes, the reason for a gene is to create more enzymes and proteins. That is all DNA's function is to create that. So if DNA provides instructions for making enzymes, well, what's an enzyme? An enzyme, you need energy so that it can create ATP. And look what it says. You need to make something brand new, and you need to add cofactors. If you look to the bottom, what does it say where you get your cofactors from? Minerals or vitamin derivatives. Nutrients provide the building blocks of your genes and turn them on and off. So it's not drugs. It's actually vitamins and minerals that will actually determine what's going to happen inside of your body. Okay? So think of your genetics as a document written in the cloud. Your Word document is always being updated until the day you die. It's not set in stone. There's only 10% of it is actually set in stone. The rest of the 90%, you have the ability to influence your genetics. That is the key takeaway of what I'm going to be preaching about in this whole lecture. Okay. So
let me echo that a little bit, Vito, so the audience gets that. So basically, you cannot eat your way out of blue eyes, black hair, so on and so forth. That's the 10% that Vito is referencing. Then when you hear about the epigenetics that's out there and the things that influence it, that's at 90%. So you can't take a vitamin, you can't, epigenetics that can't change my blue eyes to brown, my black hair to blonde, so on and so forth. That's the locked in. It's the other 90% that can be influenced. So thanks, Vito.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. And great added point there you said as well. Now, the reason why most genetics courses that you go on and you go to sleep with is because they are talking about genomics and genomics and proteomics. They're talking about the DNA structure. They're talking about the study of proteins, but how does that help us? It doesn't. That's really for the geneticists out in the world. What I'm going to teach you is epigenetics, psychosocial genomics, and nutrigenomics, talking about how we can fix our traits that we have in our bodies. So there's something out there called polymorphism, which is what's called a genetic variant. Think of that, a polymorphism is known as like a dirty gene. So what happens is that there was some type of mutation that happened and it morphed into something that is not good, obviously, in our body. So one of them is called what's called a SNP. It's called an SMP. It's a single nucleotide polymorphism. We actually, all of us have them in our bodies, right? And so like what Dr. Caldwell was saying, it can give us what our eye color trait is, what he was mentioning, right? So what happens is that when you have these SMPs, they can actually cause a swap and a certain nucleotide position, usually somewhere in the middle of that DNA structure, that ladder, and it can actually potentially cause either good or harm, right? So here we go. If you look at the study there on the top right-hand side, this was a study done in Canada, University of Alberta, And it actually says in most cases, your genes actually have less than 5% to do with the risk of developing a particular disease. So the hope is that I want you to understand that just because they say, oh, you have a genetic thing happening, that doesn't really mean much. Only 5 to 10% of it actually means something. Okay. And so look at this. It only influences about 10% of our overall health. 40 to 50% of it is actually linked to either AMD, celiac disease, or Crohn's disease. And usually those are inflammatory diseases or autoimmune problems. And where do those happen from? From your gut. And where does your gut tie to? Your brain. And where do you get all these nutrients from? You need it from vitamins and minerals. So our bodies are made up of DNA, amino acids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and all that. So there are over 250 million genetic variants. These are the top 7. Now, I'm not going to go into all 7 of them, but the biggest one is the mother effer gene, which stands for methylene tetrahydric folate reductase. And what that means, it actually helps with DNA methylation. So what is DNA methylation? What it actually does is it actually adds a methyl group. And what DNA methylation means is that it alters your genetic expression without actually altering the DNA sequence. So for example, for those ladies on the call that are taking birth control, if you were to take birth control, it actually messes with your genetic variant of the mother effer gene and your COMT gene, your genetic variant, if you're on the pill. For those people that are taking metformin, will actually affect DAO and MAOA. It actually affects those 2 different types of genetic variants, right? So depending on what's being put in your body affects these genetic variants. And we're going to get into that a little bit further. So here we go with epigenetics, talking about how changes in prostate gene expression in men undergoing an intensive nutrition and lifestyle intervention. Just as back in 2008. And pretty much what it's saying is that if you change your lifestyle, it can actually change your genetic expression. So meaning the foods that you eat, the people that you're around, the environment that you're in. If you're around people who smoke all the time, well, you're getting a lot of oxidation in your body, right? So what happens is that when you have epigenetics, over 500 genes were either upregulated or downregulated. If it's up or down, it can actually prevent stuff from happening or make something happen that you don't want, right? Like cancer, for example. So now we're talking about molecular psychiatry, talking about epigenetic reprogramming of cortical neurons. So what happens in this was that when they had this happen, they actually decreased dopamine in rats, and 2,000 genes in the prefrontal cortex were affected. So I'm just going to show you a bunch of studies talking about how epigenetics is playing a role in our neurotransmitters inside of our body. So here we go, epigenetic control in the alcoholic brain. So an alcoholic brain means that you have to have about, if you're a guy, it's 2 or more drinks. It's about 14 drinks or more per week. If it's a girl, it's 7 drinks or more per week. That is an alcoholic brain. Or if you're drinking 5 drinks in a day, that's an alcoholic brain. So anyways, when you have an alcoholic brain, if you were to have that or someone you know, they analyzed 10,000 genes in 2 regions of those alcoholic brains. And it says that it altered 191 genes that are involved in judgment and decision-making. And it also affected the production of myelin. So if you remember your dendrites and your axons, in order for them to wire together, you know how they say neurons that fire together or wire together? Well, if you have poor myelin around the wire, that means you have a faulty wire. And what happens if you have a faulty wire? You're not going to have a good connection to the brain, and you're not going to get the nutrients that you possibly need. So you need a good fatty substance. And where do you get fatty substance from? Well, a high quality fish oil would actually be a good idea for your brain and your neurons. So don't take my word for it. Let's see some examples. This is Stamatis Moratitis, who is Greek. He was a Greek war veteran. True story. New York Times actually interviewed him. So after the Second World War, which is World War II, it actually ended in 1945, for those of you who remember or your history buffs. After that war happened, he went to go seek medical treatment, and he moved to Florida. In 1976, he was actually feeling shortness of breath, and he struggled to climb stairs. So he went to a doctor. The doctor actually said that you have terminal lung cancer. And he said that you have only 1 year to live. So he's like, no, I'm not believing you. Went to a second doctor. Second doctor said the same thing. Long story short, he went to 9 doctors. All 9 doctors said, you have 1 year to live. You have terminal lung cancer. So because he was in the United States, he couldn't afford the treatment he refused chemo and radiation because he couldn't afford the treatment. So what did he do? He went back to Greece, where he's from, to go live the last year of his life to be with his loved ones that were around. He ended up living the next 40 years. When he came back, New York Times interviewed him and said, how did you survive? And stuff like that. He's like, I guess I just forgot to die. And so he's like, what did you tell the doctors, all the 9 doctors, that you're still around? He's like, they all died. He was the only one left out of all the 9 doctors. So pretty much what happens when he went back to his home country, he started to garden. He started to drink better food, or drink and eat better foods. He would actually be social, talking to his fellow loved ones and stuff like that. That was his environment that he was in. Now, does this happen for everybody? Probably not, but it's something to at least consider. It's huge impact, right? So I thought you guys would love that story. So mitochondrial DNA, all of us listening get our mitochondrial DNA from our mother. Okay. And so what happens is that there is actually a rare disease, a mitochondrial disease, which is a mitochondrial myopathy. That is Greg LeMond. He was a 3-time Tour de France winner. At the age of 32, he was actually diagnosed with this mitochondrial myopathy. So he couldn't race anymore. So it led to skeletal muscle issues, and it messes with your mitochondria. Remember where in biology days back in the day, where's your mitochondria? Right, the powerhouse of the cell. And what do you need ATP? And what do you need ATP for? Energy. And where do you get energy from? From the nutrients and vitamins that you get. Exercise, sleep, all that plays a role, right? So I wanted to bring this to your attention because sometimes if you have that mitochondrial DNA defect as an eye doctor, it can actually lead to droopy eyelids. I just thought it'd be something that you guys to consider. Doesn't mean it is, but just think of that. Not necessarily that they're older and that their skin is lagging. So how do we get energy? There's 3 different things. There's others as well, but these are the 3 main ones. So vitamin B is known as your stress vitamin, right? And specifically B2. Ironically, what do we use in the medical field in optometry with B2? And that's riboflavin. And what do we use that for? Well, collagen cross-linking to strengthen the fibers of our cornea, right? Now we have CoQ-enzyme 10. CoQ-enzyme 10 is found in every single cell in our body. It is known as the muscle vitamin. So why would this matter to you as an optometrist? Well, how many of your patients that you see are on a statin drug? Plenty. So I know all of us ask what medicines that you're on in the world, right? But how many of you are asking your patients what vitamins and minerals are you taking? If you're not, I challenge you to do those things. Because if you're on a statin drug, your CoQ10 in your body is being depleted. So not only if they're not taking a CoQ10 when they're on a statin drug, not only did the primary care physician fail, but you want to be an optometric physician, you're the backup, or instead of being the backup, you're the main person to help them. So you got to be talking about CoQ-enzyme 10 to actually give them the energy that they need. So I put there in the recommendations, what's the daily dosages of what you would take if you're healthy or if you actually are taking a statin drug, okay? And if you see there on the right-hand side, that was an investigative ophthalmology and vision science talking about how it can slow down retinal degeneration in retinitis pigmentosa. And acetylcysteine is another one, just to put it out there. It actually regulates many genes and from free radical damage. So here we go. Look at this in 2017, talking about the therapeutic potential of CoQ-enzyme 10 in retinal diseases. So if you look there on the bottom where there's results, it's this last sentence. It says, since oxidative stress also plays a critical role in the pathogenesis of diabetic retinopathy and retinitis pigmentosa, CoQ10 is a therapeutic target for both conditions. So the question is, how many of you guys see diabetic retinopathy? All of you. Are you talking to your patients about CoQ10? Probably not. Now, do we want to wait until someone actually has diabetic retinopathy? I hope no. So we got to be talking to our patients about the nutrients that they need in their bodies so that potentially they could prevent them from eye-related diseases. So here we go. We got another one. This is alpha lipoic acid. It's a fatty acid that's found in our bodies, right? Usually you get it from plants, but it protects your DNA from damage and it actually improves the efficiency of insulin, right? Not only does it do that, but it actually boosts our body's production of glutathione. Glutathione is the super antioxidant that we have inside of our body. Just like CoQ10, glutathione is also found in every single cell of your body. Not only is it found in every cell of your body, it's found in your cornea, it's found in the lens in your eye, it's found in your retina, and most people don't even realize that glutathione is in those things. So what it does, it's an antioxidant. So what does it do? It gets rid of free radicals. Okay. And so what is a free radical? This is the best way I could describe it. Think of a stool that you might be sitting on. You know how a stool has 4 legs? Pretend one of the legs is missing, and now it's a three-legged stool. That's a free radical. It's an unstable, unpaired electron. So how do you pair that electron? You need an antioxidant. Well, where would you get an antioxidant from? Again, vitamins and minerals, or the foods that you eat. So once you have antioxidants in your body, it attaches to that 3-legged stool, and it now becomes a 4-legged stool. So our job is to minimize as much as free radicals as possible. And how do you do that? Well, vitamins like C and E and CoQ10 are huge ones. What also does alpha lipoic acid do? It actually helps suppress nuclear factor kappa beta, which is an inflammatory marker that can actually cause cancer. And Dr. Caldwell is the HIV boss and doctor speaking about all of these HIV-related problems when it comes to the eye, right?
That's
So
Joseph, not me. The other,
Oh.
it's the other partner in.
Oh, there you go. Love it.
It's
So I'll give you some recommendations here of what percentages or dosages that you might take, whether you're healthy or if you're diabetic. So these are just things to have in your notes. Well, look at this one, ribose. Well, where do we get ribose? It's actually known as D-ribose. It's actually in our DNA and RNA, and it's produced in all of our mitochondrial cells. So again, mitochondria, ATP. It's the building blocks of ATPs, and it helps to maintain them. So usually a lot of athletes or triathletes, bodybuilders will take a ribose supplement to help with their strength and stamina, just so that you're aware. So if you don't want to take any supplements, I put a list of the top 10 foods there. Lamb liver, if you're eating liver, is, look at that, 300% of ribose just eating that, right? Or salmon. Salmon's another good one for those of you who eat fish, right? Personally, I don't believe adults should be drinking milk. If you are going to drink milk, you want it to be 100% grass-fed milk, because there's some people who obviously can't digest the actual protein, the casein A1 protein. And so that's something that is another issue. And again, I gave you a bunch of recommendations of ribose if you were to take it, whether you're exercising or have any type of heart disease. So here we go. We have DNA damage. We already talked about free radicals, the 3-legged stool. We want our best to avoid getting free radicals. So free radicals is what causes us to age, right? Or let's say, for example, if your hair is turning white, you actually have hydrogen peroxide that's in your body, and it's causing your hair to turn white. So we need antioxidants to help minimize the hydrogen peroxide inside of our body. So how do you get free radicals? Well, if you're around people who smoke, or you yourself smokes, or air pollution, or pesticides, or you're eating fried foods, or you're drinking a lot, those can cause free radicals. And they're actually produced, again, in our mitochondria, and it leaks out and targets our mitochondrial DNA, and that can actually lead to a lot of problems. So this is an interesting one, if you guys didn't know this. Once anybody turns over the age of 27, free radicals accumulate a lot faster than your DNA can actually repair it. So once you're under 27, your body can do a good job of it. But after that, that's why, like when you were in college, you could drink as much as you can. You could go and study and do your next test because you're under the age of 25 or under 22. But now he's like, oh, I can't do that anymore. It's because your DNA can't repair it as fast as it used to. And so obviously it can lead to replication errors and transcription errors, and we don't want that to happen.
Hey,
So
real quick, can you go back to the ribose slide, because somebody had a question.
Go ahead.
And the question is, what are those percentages of your food's percentages?
Oh, that's how much of ribose you would actually get if you were to eat that. You would get 300% dosage of ribose. Good question.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, you're very welcome. So yeah, the top food to get ribose would be lamb liver. The least of the top 10 food would be eggs at 18%. And then I wrote it out here for your notes because I'm giving you a lot of information. I'm going fast with it, but most of this is in your notes because it's hard to keep up. I'm not going to be going over every single one, but yes, perfect question. And every slide I have, what's the dosages that you need if you were to take a supplement. So can DNA repair itself? Well, remember, like I said, your story is in the cloud and is constantly being edited and rewritten, but there's repair enzymes that we have. And so look at this, the body has over 12 types. However, 3 do most of the work when it comes to DNA repair enzymes. And then we also have RNA repair enzymes, and we have mismatch repair enzymes. So what happens is if there is any type of transposition, we can actually, it's reading through the code and seeing like, where's a misnucleotide so it can replace it, right? And so it can do those things. Just wanted to show that to you on this slide. So poll number 2. Which part of the brain dilates our pupils? A, the hypothalamus, B, the locus coeruleus, 3, the hippocampus, and D, the amygdala. You'll see why I tied this into this lecture in a minute, but because I know that just came out of left field.
Okay, your polling question is open. People are answering the question. Joe, I'm assuming we're caught up with the last real quick question that we had.
Yeah, we're good.
Remember that the polling questions are part of the synchronous, so please answer the polling question. The question can be found on the right side, second one down, click polls. You can answer the question. I think on the phones, it might down be at the bottom saying that there is a polling question that's active. And we've got a pretty decent response here. All right, so I'll display the response because I know Vito's got a lots of good information. I'll go right down the line for you, Vito. 34%, 35%, 10%, 22, and 33. So you got
Hypothalamus is number
hypothalamus,
1. Okay.
number
AD.
1, and then right behind it, the amygdala at, so 36%. It's changing because people are coming in. We have 36% hypothalamus and the amygdala as 33%.
All right, cool. All right. Which was the lowest one?
B,
B, okay.
locus. Yep.
Coeruleus. All right. Very
Yep,
cool.
yep,
All right.
Coeruleus, yep.
You guys are learning a lot today. So if you look at the little diagram here, so there's different parts to the anatomy of the brain there. And so green stands for the autonomic and endocrine regulation. Pink is the salience detection and associative learning. Green is learning, memory, and plasticity. And then you got purple with attention arousal. So if you look there at the amygdala is the region in the brain that alerts like if you're in any danger. Right. And so sometimes when people are very anxious, they have what's called an amygdala hijack. And so they're very stressed and anxious and things like that. And so because their vitamin and mineral and also their hormones are out of whack. And so it will relay, the amygdala will relay the information to the hypothalamus, but it's actually the locus coeruleus, that blue spot right there is what actually dilates our pupils. And it's actually what produces, is the primary source of noradrenaline. And so what happens is that if you notice here a little picture there, right? But that locus coeruleus, it optimizes your attention and ability to assess the environment around you. So notice how it says optimizes your attention. I don't know if you know this, but when you are in love with somebody or you're attracted to somebody, your pupils will dilate. And it's that region of the brain that actually will cause that to happen. And so you'll see why I came out of nowhere with that. And because but I should probably like trademark this, put a can on stress, right? The reason why I say that is because there are 3 different things that can cause stress on the body. And so it's cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. And where does noradrenaline come from? I just showed you the locus coeruleus, which is the arousal hormone. So when you love somebody, your pupils dilate, and that's where it comes from. So you guys all learned something. And so what happens if your body's stressed out? Obviously, your hormones are out of whack and you can't function appropriately. So look at that. It causes, when you're stressed out, immune suppression, affects your DNA repair enzymes, and modulates apoptosis or apoptosis, however you want to say that word. But it causes cell death, which is sometimes we want cell death to happen, sometimes we don't. If it's too much, then that's a problem. Causes cancer and other problems. So not
So
only
Vito,
that,
with that being said, with the stress hormones, let me just kind of feed in how that feeds into the metabolic syndrome, those who that are hyperinsulinemic, those, that are, the pre-diabetic, have high blood pressure, how it all feeds into obesity, how it all feeds into the triglycerides being high, HDLs being low. They spike glucose really, really easy in the body. So all those norepinephrines and cortisol, they spike they spike glucose very, very early. Wake us up. It's part of the dawn effect in the morning. And so when we have insulin and you're spiking and you're squirting out more insulin and you have the stress hormones and it's spiking glucose and you're squeezing out insulin in your body and you're fighting that, and then you become insulin resistant. So kind of another tact on how that feeds into the metabolic syndrome and what Vito's talking into here, and how he says the hormones are all out of whack. That's what's happening from a metabolic standpoint.
1000%. So thank you for that. So going into it, because this is a genetic lecture, there's actually stress genes that we may or may not have. And so if you have these stress genes, it can actually suppress your DNA synthesis, and it can actually accelerate aging in your actual cells. And well, obviously we don't want that. So we want to minimize stress as much as possible, because if you have too much stress, it's going to affect your heart. And we don't want that obviously either. So you have your acute stress, and then you have your chronic stress. And the chronic stress is the one that actually leads to depression. And as you can see in the society today, everybody, not everybody, but a good amount of people are anxious and depressed, right? So sometimes it can be a genetic thing, which we can alter. Remember, epigenetics. So we have to figure out how can we do these things. So there are some people that actually have what's called the ATF3. It's a gene that actually protects the body. Cancer cells can switch on the ATF3 in immune cells. So again, if you have too much bad stuff happening in the body, then cancer cells or free radicals start to form, and it switches on these ATF, or it turns it off, and it can actually cause harm in your body. And then there's another one called SRY. Sorry, it's found exclusively in men, located on the Y chromosome, and it actually helps to release dopamine here. And if you were to have that, it actually can make males more aggressive when they're faced with stress. So sometimes it's just a gene that they might have, and it causes them to do that. This is an interesting one. This is a PubMed study in 2011 in psychiatry. That lady that you see on the top right corner, that's Dr. Sarah Lazar. She's actually a neuroscientist out of Harvard. And she created, she's the last author in that study there. And it says that mindfulness practice leads to increases in regional brain gray matter density. So she created, and others, an 8-week meditation program, which was called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And when they did that, look what happened. The amygdala got smaller. Remember, I told you the amygdala gets hijacked. So we want to get a smaller amygdala. We want to increase our gray matter concentration, because that's what leads to just overall concentration and calmness. And then they reported less stress and greater feeling of peace. So you're like, well, what are mindful-based stress reductions? That might be doing yoga, or that might be meditation, or that might be just talking to God, or that might be called grounding, where you put your feet on the grass. There's a lot of different things that can be mindful-based stress reduction. And so this was an interesting one that was put out in psychiatry. So on to number 3, poll number 3. Which vitamin is important for synthesis and repair for our DNA? A, vitamin A, B, vitamin B, C, vitamin C, and D, vitamin D. Which one helps with the synthesis and repair for our DNA structure?
Polling question is open. Answers are rolling in.
Cool.
And Joe, are there any questions or comments in the chat box?
No, we're good.
Awesome. I'm doing such a good job, or I'm going real quick. That's good.
It's a powerhouse full of information. So, all right. It looks like the trend is set here. And we'll display it. 12%, 36%. So vitamin B is your winner, 22%, and vitamin D at 30%. So B and D, with B being the winner at 36 and now 29.
All right, very good, very good. So I'm happy to the ones that picked actually B, because you guys are listening. B is the correct answer, but we're going to go all through all the different vitamins now, but B is the answer. In my opinion, when I do lectures, the top 2 important vitamins, even though they're all important, is vitamin B and D, both of them. If I had to pick one though, even though I just mentioned C is for your DNA, vitamin B is for your energy. But vitamin D is actually a hormone that actually helps with our defensive measures, which I'm going to go into in a little bit. So if you pick D, you're not wrong, but the answer was B, but it's a great one. So here we go. We got vitamin A. So since we live in America, we rarely see vitamin A deficiency. So if you were to have vitamin A deficiency, that would lead to actually night blindness. And if those are the countries that you see there, South Asia and Africa, they actually suffer, 50% suffer because of lack of food. So where do we get vitamin A from? From food, as you see in the picture there. We have two different types of sources for vitamin A. We have animal sources and plant sources. So that's the animal sources is known as retinoid. They come in three forms: retinol, which is the alcohol form. We got retinal, the aldehyde form, and then you have retinoic acid, which is usually seen in those cosmetics with those creams they put on their skin to help minimize free radicals. But the retinol is the one that's 12 times more potent. And that, look, if you notice there, where do we get it from? Well, again, liver, milk, eggs, cod liver oil can actually get good amounts of vitamin A. If you don't eat meat because you're vegan or vegetarian, well, there's plant sources, and we all know about carotenoids, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, but it also helps suppress a gene in skin inflammation, which is good for carotenoids. So I didn't know if you guys knew that, but it actually, carotenoids help with your skin. And so there's a recommendation for normal health, 5,000 IUs of vitamin A. But the interesting part, if you look at back at the top, if you were to have that gene, the BCM01, it actually affects how vitamin A in plant forms converts to the actual active form. And if you happen to have a GG variant of that gene, you would be a poor converter, so you need more preformed vitamin A. So obviously you're not going to know any of this information. The only way for you to know whether you do or you don't have these genes is to get genetic testing, which we're going to get into. But so some people, that's why when someone eats a certain food and another person does, they might have a different effect because sometimes they have a genetic component to their bodies. So here we go with the next one, carotenoids. Whenever you hear the word carotenoids, I'm sure your guys' mind automatically straight goes to macular degeneration. I want you to pretend that macular degeneration does not exist. Obviously exists. I'm just saying pretend it doesn't for this analogy that I'm saying. Carotenoids are important not only for your eyes, but they're also important for your brain and also for your body. So it also helps to minimize the chances of cognitive decline, like Alzheimer's disease and dementia, right? So that is what I want you to take away. Why is that important? Because if carotenoids, they're antioxidants, okay? So remember, what do we need? So whenever you have oxidation, in the world of everything, we always hear about inflammation. Inflammation, inflammation, inflammation. Dry eyes disease, inflammation. Well, we always forget about oxidation. Oxidation is kind of like think of like you left a bike outside and it's cold and there's water on there and it started to rust, or a car starts to rust. Well, oxidation is oxidation. In our bodies, if you're oxidized, that means your body internally is rusting. So in order to minimize that rusting, we need antioxidants. Carotenoids is a big one. Carotenoids, if you don't know this, there's 600 in nature. 20 of them are actually found in our blood, and 3 of them are found in the eye. So that means 23 carotenoids are found in our body. So think of Michael Jordan. Every time you hear of a carotenoid, that means 23 are actually in your body. Carotenoids are what gives vitamins. Carotenoids are what gives vegetables and fruits the color, the skin color. Okay. And so where do we get that from? Well, obviously you eat vegetables to get your carotenoid levels up. It influences the beta carotene, so carrots obviously, influences the activity of a key cancer suppressing gene known as P21, which is a skin cancer cell, and suppresses the activity of HO1 gene, which causes skin sunburn. So now, when you take a carotenoid, it helps to minimize the chances of skin cancer. I bet none of you guys knew that, right? Because your minds are always programmed to teach people about AMD. That's why I say forget AMD exists right now. It is important for your body. So should you be supplementing with a carotenoid, or should you be eating food that contains carotenoids? The answer is obviously yes. Okay. Lycopene, which is found in tomatoes, concentrates in the prostate. Okay. And so we want to inhibit any activity of transforming growth factor alpha. Okay. If you have a high intake of tomato sauces, it actually reduces the risk of by 45% for men who have prostates. Pretty interesting stuff and cool stuff, in my opinion. Hopefully it is to you guys. So let's see, we're talking about carotenoids. There was a product out there known as the MPOD. You guys know the macular pigment optical density, and it can detect the carotenoids in someone's eye. And so according to research back in 2001 and 2002, based in ophthalmology and also in nutrition, they were saying that this is what the normal population, the average carotenoid levels in the population is about 340 or 0.34. So the score goes from all the way from 0 all the way to 1 or 100. And so if you notice, 22, according to this cartoon, 22% of the population are considered in the green zone or the green or blue zone. majority of people, most of Americans are in the yellow to red. So we know red is not good. Yellow is warning, get in there, right? So if it says 80% of people, that means every 5 patients you see, 4 out of those 5 have low carotenoid levels in their eye. So when you take a carotenoid, it's like you putting polarized glasses internally. So right now I'm at home, but usually when you see me lecturing, I always have my sunglasses on, and usually on my head, or I'm wearing it inside of the conference with my camera. So the other reason why I wear my sunglasses indoors, which most people don't realize, is that indoor lighting sometimes is actually harmful for you because of the poor lighting that they're using. So I'm actually shielding myself from the poor lighting that's actually inside of the conference rooms. That's a whole different lecture if you ever want to hear that one. But so here we go. There are ways to test your skin carotenoid levels with different devices that exist. So look at this one. This is in the biochemistry and biophysics of optical assessment of skin carotenoid status as a biomarker of vegetable and fruit intake. So there's 2 ways to test it. You have what's called your resonance Raman spectroscopy, and you have reflection spectroscopy. And what they're doing is they're utilizing light to see and diagnose what kind of carotenoid levels or vitamin and mineral levels that are inside of your body. So the older version is known as the resonance Raman spectroscopy, but even though it's older, it's actually better for biological samples. It's usually the more thorough, validated method. And then the newer version is your reflection spectroscopy. But if you notice in the bottom, according to the study, it says both methods hold promise for applications in nutrition science and epidemiology. So let's keep diving into it. So here's a study, again, in biological pharmacy, in biochemistry, talking about skin carotenoids as a biomarker, but this one's talking about the Raman, the older version. If you look in the green, or look in the yellow, it says skin carotenoids may effectively serve as an integrated biomarker of health with higher status reflecting greater fruits and vegetable intake, lack of smoking, and lack of adipocity, which means that adipose tissue, and then the less fat you have on your body, the better your intake is going to be inside of the body. Thus, this biomarker holds promise as both a health biomarker and an objective indicator for fruit and vegetable intake. And obviously, they're utilizing it for more medical and public health services. So let's keep dialing this in. This study was out of Yale School of Public Health and also Cancer Center. So there is a device out there. I'm not going to say any companies, but I'm just going to let you know these exist. There is a company out there that's called the biophotonic scanner. But what you do is you put your hand on it, and it'll diagnose and tell you what your nutrient levels are on your skin carotenoid levels. So if you look at what it says here, it says, what are the key factors of knowing what your score is? Your dietary habits, the foods that you eat, supplement intake, the vitamins that you take, lifestyle choices. So if you have a high stress or low stress, and then lastly is your body composition. So just know this, the fatter you are, and no disrespect to anybody if you are fat, the fatter you are, the smaller your brain. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not smart. It just means the smaller your brain, that means it's going to lead to cognitive decline in the future much faster. So the bigger your waistline, the smaller your brain. So that hopefully that brings a shock to you so that you can go out and start moving and exercising and doing all the things and talking to your patients about it. But look at this, lifestyle choices. For those of us, like the 3 of us on this call, the main people, we usually frequent air travelers because we're constantly lecturing. When you have frequent air travel, that's actually can cause radiation or oxidation because you're constantly moving. And it also messes with your circadian rhythm because what happens if you go East Coast to West Coast and back and forth, right? So that's another importance. Or what happens if you're visiting family and you're constantly going back and forth and you're in different time zones? These are all things that we don't think about. And hopefully I'm alerting it to you all. Okay, so if you do these things, you're going to have a higher score. There's another device out there. Now this one is, this one here, the biophotonic scanner is Resonance Raman, the older version. This is the first, I believe this is one of the first ones. This is called the Vegimeter, which uses reflection spectroscopy. This is the first study ever that actually tested the child and their parents. If you look here, this is in Frontiers in Nutrition that just came out in 2024. So they tested 58 children aged 6 to 15 years old and their parents, and they're checking their skin carotenoid levels using the Vegimeter. So what you do, you see the device on the right, you put your finger in there, it scans your finger, in about a minute or two, it'll tell you what your score is. So the results were anywhere between 0 to 100. For children, children have higher levels than adults. So the mean score was 366. For parents, their score was 315. If you remember, the average in the United States is 340, which is still poor. We want our goal to be 450 or higher. So how do they measure this? Well, if a child or the parent ate no vegetables per day, 1 to 2 vegetables per day, or 3 to 4 vegetables per day. The more vegetables you ate, obviously the higher your score is. So just know there's a company out there that created what's called the Veggie Meter. There's another company in the eye care space that licensed that product, and they called it the Life Meter. You may or may not have it in your practice. This meter is the same thing as the Veggie Meter. It's a reflection spectroscopy, and it measures your carotenoid levels. According to the Life Meter, there have been 30 peer-reviewed publications demonstrating its validity, consistency, and effectiveness in over 2,000 subjects of varying races, ethnicities, and ages. So you see the score 533? That's actually my score. I was at a conference. They had it there. I put my finger in there, and it gave me my score. So me, could I be better? Sure, especially since I'm the one lecturing, but I'm way better than the average American. That's me personally. Okay. If you look here, it says on the Life, well, how do you get a good score? Poor, average, good, and excellent. So excellent means that when you have excellent score, what do we all do as adults? Well, majority of people do as adults. That is important with our vision. And the answer is driving, especially driving at nighttime. So if you have a higher score, what does that mean? You're going to have better contrast sensitivity. And what does that mean? So that means it minimizes the reduction of glare so that you don't get into an accident. So would you want to have a lower contrast sensitivity or a higher contrast sensitivity? The answer is a higher one. What happens if you're an athlete? Do you want a lower concentration of your contrast sensitivity or a higher one? Obviously a higher one, because if you have a higher contrast, that means you can actually hit the ball potentially better or see through the sun a little bit better when you have a higher contrast sensitivity. So there's another device in the eye care space called the ZX Pro that you probably didn't know about. And there's an optometrist that you see there. If you see me on the bottom with me, him in there, I have by the way, no financial disclosures on this device. But that gentleman, who is a professor at Western, Dr. Davey, is the chief medical and science officer for this product. And this one doesn't use reflection or resonance Raman. This one uses heterochromatic flicker photometry. And if you notice, it's the same scores as you can see there. But this one is a 2-minute ocular test that provides a score that will tell you how much your zeaxanthin and lutein is in your eyes. Okay? I'm just showing you all these things. And so look what it says there: night driving or day glare challenges, cognitive health concerns, age-related eye health concerns, visual challenge related to diabetes. So do we want a high score or a low score? Obviously a high score. So do you want to wait for a problem to happen, or do you want to get to the bottom of it before it happens? Hopefully you're on the offensive and not the defensive. There's another one that just came out last month. This is the world's first AI-powered nutrition device built on 26 million clinical measurements. I personally have this device. I got it a few days ago. I've actually done it on patients. I've done about 57 scans. The reason why I got it is, if you see it here, it says Raman spectroscopy. It's the older version, but the real reason I got it is because it takes the measurement in 10 seconds. I don't have time to be sitting around 1 to 2 minutes waiting for a patient. Now, you can give it to your tech to do it, but I don't have time for that. So in 10 seconds, you put your finger on that device, it'll tell you what your score is, and it'll show you. It takes 700,000 nutritional measurements through your finger in 10 to 15 seconds. If you look there as an eye doctor, well, what do I care about? Well, I care about eye health, I care about gut health, and I also care about brain health. So we need to know what our levels are, because if we don't know what your levels are, you're just taking stuff to take stuff, and you have no idea what's going on. So since we're going back to carotenoids and we think about macular degeneration, well, there are 36 different genetic factors when it comes to age-related macular degeneration. So you can see here, you got geographic atrophy. What are the risk factors? As you can see, obviously it's age. So as you get older, it's possible. If you're white or Caucasian, smoking's a big one, or around people who smoke. Choroidal neovascularization, there's different genes or genetic risk factors that are there. The treatments for it is anti-VEGF, or there's complement pathway drug discovery, right? And then damages, we already know what happens to AMD is damaging your photoreceptors, your RPE, your Bruch membrane. And so how do we minimize this from happening? Again, it's vitamins and minerals to minimize the chances of this happening. So you know how they say, like, your genetics or your family history of genetics? Yes, that's true, but you can change that potentially. So I'm not going to bore you on all this stuff, but this is just the genetics. These are, remember I went to SNPs, the SNPs? There's 10 SNPs associated with AMD in 7 different genes that were determined, okay? If you were the ones that are red, those two, if you happen to have that gene, it actually protects you from getting AMD. The ones that are underlined are actually can cause it to go a little bit faster. So these are just genes to show you. So obviously we're not geneticists, right? And so you'd have to go and get genetic testing done. But I'm just bringing this to your attention that this exists out there for AMD. Another study in Clinical Nutrition 2016, dietary folate with B vitamins. So remember I told you how crucial B vitamin is. It's our stress vitamin. And so they did a study between the ages of 55 and 80. There was about 22,525 subjects in this age-related eye disease study. And out of the 2,400 of them progressed to geographic atrophy over 13 years. And look what it says. There was a reduced risk of progression to geographic atrophy with increasing intake of thiamine. Thiamine is vitamin B1, riboflavin, which is B2, and folate, which is B9, after adjusting for age, sex, and total energy intake. So how important is vitamin B2? I would say it's pretty important. According to Clinical Nutrition in 2016, high folate intake was associated with a reduced risk of progression to geographic atrophy. Again, folate is B9. So when someone's pregnant, what does your OBGYN tell you to take? Well, they tell you to take a multivitamin, but they tell you to go on a folate because it can, if you don't take it, it can lead to neural tube defects in the baby. That's why vitamin B is very, very important. So if you don't take a supplement, well, you got to eat a healthy diet rich in folate, obviously. Now we got in 2015 talking about homocysteine and the risk of age-related macular degeneration. Homocysteine is an inflammatory marker, but we all have it in our bodies. We wanted to keep it in check, but if you have too much of it, it can cause problems. So according to this study, they pulled 11 studies. They had 1,000 cases and put it up against a control. And what it says was that it demonstrated that AMD is associated with elevated plasma total homocysteine levels and decreased vitamin B12. You want to take a guess what lowers your homocysteine levels in your body? The answer is vitamin B. Now you know. So let's go back to vitamin B again, because this was the answer of the poll. So you know that song? It says, to the windows, to the walls. You guys all know that song. I know you do. What are the numbers that they say in the beginning of that song? If you remember, hopefully you're singing now. They say 3, 6, 9, if you know, if you're following with me. So why am I being silly with this right now? Because your DNA structure, the codes, it's vitamin B3, 6, and 9 are what creates and helps the energy in our DNA structure. Okay? Not only that, but it helps the Krebs cycle. And if you have low levels of just B2 and B3, it can actually cause fragility in your chromosomes and break the DNA strands. Well, why would you want that to happen? So I always love it when someone's like, oh, okay, so this is what I do in clinic. Because I ask my patients what vitamins they're on. So if they say they're on, let's pretend they said I'm on a vitamin B12. So I'm going to ask them, okay, I don't just say, okay, I continue asking. I probe them. Who told you to be on vitamin B12? Was it your doctor? Was it a nurse? Was it your friend? Was it your cousin? Did you do research on your own? I want to know that information. Because the reason why I want to know that is because you need vitamin B6 to properly absorb B12. And not only that, but you need what's called glutathione to actually really make it really absorb to the full best potential it could possibly have on the body. So you might be taking a B12 just to take a B12, but it's not really absorbing in your body. So where's my point? My point is that you want to not isolate your Bs. You want to be on a B complex because it has all the different Bs inside of it. So vitamin B5 helps to build your coenzyme A. B6 is needed for serotonin, GABA, and taurine. And look, remember I was telling you about DNA methylation when it comes to epigenetics? You need 2, 6, 9, and 12. So yay that you're on a 12, but what about the other Bs? Right? So if you have DNA damage from your B vitamins, well, what's going to happen? It has identical damage that's caused by radiation. That's wild. So if you see there, I put the notes on the bottom. What's your recommendations when it comes to a B complex? And I'm going to get into more with that as well. So look, if you see stress, anxious, depressed, you want a B complex. We're going back to the mother effort gene. That's what it's really called. So it's the enzyme that's needed for normal utilization for folic acid. In order for methylation reactions to occur, you need all those vitamins that you see there. And if you notice there, look, glutathione is on that list to actually help with your epigenetics. If you have a polymorphism into that variant, it's going to increase your blood homocysteine levels. So what did I tell you before? How do you decrease your homocysteine levels? You need to take vitamin B, and you need to be on a complex for that. Okay, if you look at the notes or the studies here, it says how it can actually cause spina bifida in birth defects, because remember folate, which is folic acid, number 9. And the other thing that most people don't realize is that folic acid is actually the synthetic version. You actually don't want the synthetic versions. The reason why is because if you have that mother effort gene in your body, you actually can't properly absorb vitamin B at all. So how would you know if you have that gene? You need to get it tested, obviously. So that means you would need what's called a methylated B complex, because whether you do or you do not have that gene, you'll properly absorb it. So if you take a regular B complex, it may or may not do something for you. I know I just blew all your mind. It's because of our genetics. So now look at this. Methylation cycle. More than 200 of our bodily functions rely on methylation. What's the goal? It actually, remember I told you it adds a methyl group, and the goal is to make homocysteine, but you want it to be regulated, the homocysteine levels. You don't want it to go too much because it's going to cause inflammation in the body. There's another thing out there called SAMe, which is S-adenosylmethionine. We need methionine, and that's where we need those methyl groups, because it helps it transfer the methyl groups for the function of our bodies to do what it needs to do. And you can see here what's the end goal. Well, phosphatidylcholine, what's that for? It's for movement, right? You need creatinine and melatonin. Melatonin's for sleep, as you guys know. And then obviously when things are methylated properly, it's going to get rid of your, it's going to expel different things that we don't want in our body, like histamine, arsenic, which is cancerous, things like that, right? So that's why DNA methylation is actually very important. And the mother effort gene is the #1 out of all of the 250 plus that we have out there. Let's go with vitamin C. So I don't know about you, but imagine being in the 50s, just smoking a pipe, just in a chem lab, just working on stuff and just piping it up there. That was kind of interesting. But that gentleman right there, that scientist, he was the one that actually discovered in 1939 vitamin C. And well, we all know that vitamin C helps with immunity, right? Because if you get a cold or a fever, you're going to drink some vitamin C or take a lozenge and things of that nature. Well, if someone were to have this gene, the GSTT1 gene, you can't absorb vitamin C efficiently. Okay. And if you have that deletion variation for whatever reason, then you have 20% lower blood levels of vitamin C. So if that was the case, if you had that genetic gene inside it, you need double the daily requirements in your actual diet. Again, how would you know? You don't. You would have to get it genetically tested. Vitamin D. So I'm big into sports. If it wasn't for optometry, if it wasn't for sports vision, I promise you I would not be an optometrist today. Because of sports vision, I'm here. So vitamin D, what do people scream in the stands when it's time to stop a play? Defense, defense, defense. Vitamin D is defense. What is vitamin D for? It's actually not a vitamin. It's actually a hormone. It actually activates over 900 stem cells in your body. So vitamin D will actually help with diabetes, dementia, depression, anything that starts with a D, vitamin D helps you with. So that's why I say vitamin D is your #1 vitamin, in my opinion. But vitamin B is a close second, even though they're all important. So because we have what's called the vitamin D receptor gene. It regulates how our body uses vitamin D and calcium. If you have a polymorphism in that receptor gene, you'll have lower levels of vitamin D. The crazy part, or I'm sure you guys know this, but 80% of the population is vitamin D deficient. Why? Because we live in a high-strung society. We don't go outside. We're indoors. We get in our car to go to work, to go back in our car, to go to our house, to live in polluted lights. So we're not getting proper vitamin D. Well, how would you get proper vitamin D? You eat it or you supplement. Here we go with vitamin E, right? We remember I told you about vitamin E, talking about how it goes into skincare usually. But this is something that you probably don't know. There's synthetic forms and natural forms. So when you're looking at the pill, you want the bottle of a supplement, you want to turn around and look at the vitamin E content on it. And you want to make sure that it's in D-alpha formula. That means it's in its natural state. If it says DL on it, that means it's in a synthetic state. So well, why is that important? Because if you have it in a synthetic state, it only absorbs about, if you have it in a synthetic, sorry, when it's in your natural form, it absorbs 2 times faster than in a synthetic form. But when it came to vitamin B, synthetic versus natural form, it's 7 times difference. So you always want to look for the natural state. And it's the reason why we need vitamin E, because it helps with minimizing beta amyloid protein, which is what causes Alzheimer's disease and also cancer. So look at this. High food intake, according to that study, of vitamin E reduced the risk of Alzheimer's by 70%. Okay. And what do we want to do? We want to prevent radical oxidation, obviously. And again, I have all the different dosages for you in your notes. So now is your homework. So when you go to the store, you're going to pick up a pill. I find this hilarious. It says that Nature's Made is the #1 recommended pharmacy supplement. Pharmacists could care less about vitamins. They are trained, or they are actually legal drug dealers. They are taught in school that a vitamin is expensive, just horse pee. That is what they're taught. The reason why I know this is because I interview a lot of pharmacists. So they are recommending this. Now, if you look at the lists here, if you look, let's see, vitamin E. This is Nature's Made, the one that you see in every store, and it's the #1. Vitamin E, what did it say there? It says DL. What is DL? You now know it's a synthetic version. Do you want a synthetic version? No. But look at this. Let's look at other ingredients. Why would you want in a supplement modified food starch? Explain to me. Maltodextrin. When you take maltodextrin, that affects the gut lining in your gut. Remember, we need a strong gut lining. And if it's not, it's going to damage your brain. Okay. Now look at here. Thiamine, niacin, vitamin B6, or folate. Look, folic acid. That means it's in a synthetic state. Remember what I said? You want methylfolate. So I just looked at random vitamins. Who cares the companies? Look at folate. You see where it says methylfolate? Now you know it's in its natural form. Okay. Well, let's look over here. Another one. Folate. Methyl tetrahydrofolate. Vitamin B12. Methylcobalamin. So you want to check the dosage and the quality of each nutrient that you go on. Because if you go to the store, you're going to see hundreds of thousands of vitamins out there. And what are you going to pick? The one on sale. Right? True or not true? Definitely true. So this is the way, if it was a perfect world, the easiest way to take a supplement is actually liquid form because it goes straight into the body, or you can take it IV. The tablet, which is the one that most people use, is the hardest one to take. So there's something called bedpan bullets when there are those nurses out there. So there's a study, or there was an article in Harvard saying that, are you wasting money on supplements? That's why pharmacists are taught that supplements don't do anything. Because when you are, it's not absorbed properly in your gut lining, especially if you don't have good stomach acid in your gut lining, it's also not being properly absorbed. So what happens? There's something called bedpan bullets, where you can see that the pills, the whole pill, is actually being seen on X-ray scans. Crazy. And then they obviously poop it out, and then you see it in their stool. So why am I preaching about vitamins? Because we're eye doctors, right? This is a study in 2023 in the University of Toronto, Department of Ophthalmology. Look at the bottom 3. Do we not see dry eye disease? Do we not see AMD and diabetic retinopathy? And it's telling you here all the different things and the dosages of the treatments of what to do. This is in ophthalmology talking about this. This is fantastic. So why are we talking about, oh, put an eye drop? Oh, do this with your nose. Nasal, like, we got to wake up and use our brains. So you can obviously have it in your notes. You don't need to take a screenshot of it because it's in your notes. So I just put this as a whole healthy grocery list of all the different foods that actually have these different carotenoids, vitamins, minerals, and things of that nature, right? Because food is medicine. The problem, though, is that food is it's not the same as it used to be because of the pesticides and things of that nature. So that's why supplementation is key, but you need the good supplements. And also you need to know your genetics too to figure that out as well. I thought this was fun. Just so you guys know, there's actually something called spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome. So what happens is that when they go into space, the fluid in their brain is actually going to the front of the eye, and it's actually causing swelling to their nerves. That gentleman, that person in space right there, the astronaut, is actually taking an OCT in space. And what they're doing is that they're checking their blood samples. They take blood samples like 6 months before the actual flight and in flight, and then once they get back on Earth. And what they're looking at is they're looking at their vitamin B supplements. and they're doing this blood draw and genetic analysis to try to see what's happening and why is this happening to these astronauts. So, in the next slide, they're just look. I love how they're just taking different scans on it. It says approximately 70% of astronauts aboard the International Space Station experience some swelling in the back of their eyes, and so they're trying to figure out how vitamin B can actually help minimize that type of swelling. So I thought that was pretty cool coming out of NASA. Now, interestingly enough, whatever these astronauts are experiencing is the same thing or the same symptoms that women will get if they were to have polycystic ovary syndrome. And what's happening to both of these? Well, they're again having swelling in the retinas, but they have higher homocysteine levels, elevated intracranial pressure, right? And we're messing up with metabolism. Okay. I just thought it was something interesting for you guys to know. And now we got to talk about minerals. So we have vitamins and also minerals. Think of minerals like the spark plug to your vitamin. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of lists here. I know I'm running low on time and I got to get through this. I probably got like another 30 minutes left. So selenium is a really good one because that helps to activate also glutathione. So it helps to turn on genes that fight cancer cells. So again, this is just in your notes that you have. Chromium and magnesium. For those of you who came to my lecture last time, I was talking about magnesium glycinate. So magnesium is a muscle relaxer. It actually helps to minimize stress and helps us to get to sleep a little bit better as well. Iron, okay? This one was interesting because it's obviously talking about our blood, but iron is actually an essential micronutrient for our microbes. Remember I told you we have more bacterial genes than we do have regular genes, like human genes. So we need iron in our bodies. Again, we can find it in both animal sources and also in food like spinach and green leafy vegetables. But this was interesting. If you were to have this HFE, hereditary hemochromatosis, if you were to have that, you need to actually reduce your iron intake because it can actually cause diabetes and eye defects. I just thought this was something interesting because we're eye doctors. And so also manganese, another mineral, competes with iron inside of the body. Okay. And again, it can lead to hair loss. I already talked to you about how if you have hydrogen peroxide inside of your body, it can lead to whitening of your hair. There's something called the ACE gene. If you have a high salt intake, there's a gene out there that can actually increase your blood pressure based on your salt intake. So again, we're not geneticists. I just wanted to share with you that this exists out there. So we have genes for eating lots of salt. So if you have this certain gene, you have a greater risk of experiencing high blood pressure. And if you have another type of gene, you have a low risk. So again, it comes down to your genetics and your epigenetics. I'm going to go quick with this. CYP1A2 gene. Again, I know I'm putting you to sleep with this part of stuff, but for those of you who drink coffee, this is actually interesting. If you were to have that gene that you see there, if you have the GA or AA, you're a fast metabolizer of caffeine. If you have you have a slow metabolizer of caffeine, right? So caffeine actually has a half-life of about 6 hours. So we want to limit our intake of caffeine right before we go to sleep because it can actually mess up with your melatonin receptors. And so I just thought this is something of interest because obviously a lot of coffee drinkers. I already talked to you about the fatter you are, the smaller your brain. So this is just something that I was sharing with you, not just me trying to like bash somebody. This is actually studies on this. So again, it decreases your volume size of your hippocampus, the fatter you are. So how I describe hippocampus to people, what do you do at school on campus? You're constantly learning and memorizing things. And hippo's a big animal. So you want your hippocampus to be as big as possible because that means your learning and memory is going to be retained throughout your lifetime. If you're diminishing your size of your hippocampus, what's going to happen? Dementia. So remember I talked to you about methylene tetrahydrofolate, the mother effer? This is another genetic variant. This one's called the COMT enzyme or COMT gene. And if you were to have this biomarker, it can influence the brain levels of your dopamine. If you have 2 copies of this variant, it increases the dopamine in the prefrontal cortex, right? And so again, it comes down to methylation. If you have a fast COMT gene, it could lead to low dopamine depression. If you have a slow one, it could lead to higher stress and anxiety. So again, it comes down to understanding the variants that we have, and we're almost there to talk about genetic testing. So there's medications. In the future, hopefully, because remember I was telling you about nutrigenomics, in the future, hopefully doctors will be prescribing medicines based on our genetics. So like, okay, you have this certain gene, okay, you can't take this because that's going to affect you here, but it's going to give you this because it's going to influence there. We're getting there. We're hopefully getting there at some point. So there's these genes that you see there on the screen, that if you, whether you have it or you don't have it, the bottom line is that the medicine will either work for you or it won't work for you. So that's an interesting take. Again, we won't know that unless you get genetically tested. So again, just a whole bunch of substates talking about, like, if you have that gene, it may or may not affect your antidepressants if you're on it, a beta blocker if you're on it. So again, just know that this is something out there that exists. Here we go about sugar proteins, like Dr. Caldwell was mentioning about before. Glycation, how I describe it, and they're called AGEs, and they're called advanced glycation end products. What that means in normal layman terms, if you were to, let's say you're at a restaurant and you're at a steak joint, whenever you order your steak, type it in the chat, I guess, so you guys can stay awake, I guess. How do you order your steaks? Medium, medium rare, well done. Bottom line is that whenever someone orders a well done steak, you know how those burnt, crispy edges on the steak is all black and charred? That is an AGEs. So what happens is that when you have that black charcoal on the outside of the steak and you eat it, it actually causes AGEs, which means that you're creating oxidation in your body and causing free radicals to occur when you have an AGEs. And it's, again, a sugar protein. And that in stress also increases glycation. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. Biological aging. We already talked about mitochondrial DNA. It's the most common genetic disorder because it first targets your free radicals, and we don't want that to happen. So that's why we have those skin creams for vitamin E and other vitamin and minerals as well. For those who suffer from breast cancer, unfortunately, there's different mutations that can occur that you see there on the screen. But I thought this was interesting. It's with this type of gene or biological aging can cause cholesterol deposits or xanthelasma on the actual eyelid. So poll number 4, because we got 30 minutes left or 35 minutes left. Sleeping, just how many hours a night for 1 week straight affects our genes? A, 6 hours a night, 7 hours a night, 8 hours a night, or D, 9 hours a night? Sleeping, how many hours a night for 1 week straight affects our genes? What do you think it is?
Okay, while those are rolling in, most people eat their steaks medium rare. You touched on this. What's your opinion on macular risk genetic testing and your thoughts, ophthalmologists not embracing it?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm going to get into the genetic testing in a moment, but
Okay, I wasn't sure if you'd make it or not.
oh yeah, I'm going to get there. I'll go as fast as I
Mhm.
can because I know I gave you a lot of information. So,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna get that. But that's good. I mean, in a perfect world, we would want to know everything, you know. But I'm going to get into a little bit, dive a little deeper into that.
And they're asking the question, they want clarification, affecting in a good or bad way for the polling question.
Oh, in a bad way. Good, that's a good point. That's actually a great point, actually. But yeah, so affected in a bad way. Now I know to
We
tweak that
have
question.
the trend, I think, already set. So for your time, so you get through the material, so I know you got a lot, is 6 hours was the winner at 45%, then 21, 31, 8 hours was 31, and then 9 hours was 3. So 46, 20, 31, and 3.
I love it. All right, perfect. So the answer is 6 hours a night. So according to that study that you see there in 2023 in the Brain Behavioral Immune Health, what's happening is that, so our chromosomes, as you guys know, we have 23 chromosomes. And so the ends of the chromosomes, we have what's called telomeres. So telomeres are like the end caps of chromosomes. So think of it like your shoelaces, they have the end caps of the laces. Those are telomeres. What happens is that when you don't sleep or your body's getting oxidized, those telomeres are shortening. The shorter your telomeres, the quicker you are to die or seeing Jesus or whoever you believe in, right? So we want our telomeres to be as big as possible, our chromosomes, so that we stay alive. So what does that mean? That means you need to sleep more. Because when you get 6 hours a night for 1 week, 711 genes were either up or down regulated. And look at that, 10 genes affected your circadian rhythm, 4, your sleep homeostasis, 2, oxidative stress and metabolism. So you're like, oh, I can function on 5 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep and I'm good the next day. Yes, personally for that day, but biologically, no, you're not. You're actually getting to the grave faster by doing that. So you need to have 7 to 9 hours of sleep minimum per night. Now you're like, oh, that's impossible. Well, make it happen somehow. If you want to be real with people, right? So you need better sleep because it's gonna. What happens when you sleep is what we get what's called a brainwash inside of your brain, and so it's getting rid of the toxins like beta amyloid, to minimize your chances of cognitive decline, right? Now, for those of you who are like, you know what, but I don't believe them. There's some of you that like I could function on 4 or 5 hours. Technically true. In 2001, this neurology professor in San Francisco found this clock gene, which is called PER2, and it actually affects our circadian rhythm. But if they were to have this potential gene, they can actually have 20 to 25% of the population that have this gene can actually sleep less and function better. And this particular gene is found in our brain, our heart, and our liver. Okay, so they can actually they get their normal 8 hours, but they usually go to bed earlier than most people. So instead of people going to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, they usually go to bed at like 6 or 7 and they wake up at 3 or 4. That's this particular gene. There's another gene that they just discovered was the DEC2 mutation. Only 1% of the global population has this mutation. So, for example, if there's 8 billion people in the world, 1% is, check my math, is that 80 million people in the world? 80 million people in the world have this mutation. If you were to have this mutation, that means you could function on less than 7 hours of sleep, and you would do better than the people who sleep on 7, 8, 9 hours. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, yeah, I have that gene. Well, you wouldn't know unless you get it checked, right? So again, we wouldn't know. Just know that this exists. I'm just bringing this to your attention. Okay, here we go. Genetic testing. This particular company is called Self-Decode. I have no financial disclosures. I wish I had financial disclosures. I'd be a millionaire. So comprehensive genetic testing in 2016. This one is checking 200 million SNPs that are analyzed. But the reason why I brought this one to your attention is because this one actually is linked to sleep. So if you have issues with sleep, this is a good one or a potential good one. Are there others out there? Sure. This is a good one that you can potentially use for sleep. Again, I'm going to go fast with this because I don't want to bore you. Alzheimer's disease. I already talked to you about it. If you don't sleep and your brain is getting oxidated and things of that nature, you can actually have cognitive decline. There's a whole bunch of genetic factors. The biggest one of the three is APOE allele. Then you have TREM, APP. What APOE is, it's apolipoprotein. What that is a cholesterol carrying protein inside your brain. So it carries good LDL and bad LDL, all that stuff. So what happens is that if you have 2 variants of that allele of APOE, there's 2, 3, and 4. If you have the 4 version of it, that's a problem. You have a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So here's the stats. If you look here, if the overall population, so if you look here, if you're African American to the overall population, they have the higher chances of getting this APOE4 allele. But if you look at the frequency of it, it's actually affecting more Caucasians in this example with the APOE4 allele. Okay, so if you look where it says disease association gene, 3 common variants, I already told you there's E2, E3, and E4. If you were to happen to have E2 in your genetic structure, it actually prevents you from getting Alzheimer's disease. It's less than 10% of the population. I think it's like less than 8%. Most common that everybody has, most common is APOE3. And then if you have 4, if you have 2 alleles of that, it increases your chances of Alzheimer's disease by 8 to 12 times. So if you think that you probably don't have it, well, hopefully you don't have it. We don't know unless you get it tested. Thor, you know, Chris Hemsworth, the actor, he actually has 2 alleles of APOE4. So when he found that out, he actually stopped acting for a little bit because he wanted to take a look at his health and his metabolic system and all that stuff so that he could live longer and be around with his kids. There's actually a show on, I think it's on Disney Plus. It's called Limitless. If you haven't seen it, he goes on a journey talking about what he's done to try to minimize his chances of death. Pretty cool series. So again, bring this out. I'm not going to bore you. There's a whole bunch of genes here. I'm not going to bore you on genetics, on different things, but this is what can cause what happens in Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so now we're talking about, should you do genetic testing or should you not? This is talking about statements against APOE testing. So do you want to know if you are going to get Alzheimer's disease? This is 20 years ago. The American Academy of Neurology in 2001, and then in 2015, you have medical genetics, and then you have National Society of Genetic Counselors. What they're saying is that don't order APOE genetic testing as a predictive test for Alzheimer's disease. I find that interesting. This is the Academy of Neurology saying don't do it. Okay, it is not recommended at the time, but this is early on this is 20 years ago, right? So there were studies in 2021 and 2020 in Alzheimer's disease, talking about people who actually got tested. And those that got tested, it said, according to the study, so MCI stands for mild cognitive impairment. It did not increase anxiety and depression and may provide psychological benefits. The other study says results to cognitively unimpaired adults does not cause adverse psychological outcomes. So what it's saying is that if they actually preferred knowing, and it actually didn't cause them to be more anxious because they knew about finding out if they had this allele or not. So I thought that was pretty cool to bring to your attention. So we're on survey number 5. We got 20 minutes left. I got to go quick. Which year did the FDA grant clearance for pharmacogenetic genomic testing? Oh, A, 2005, B, 2015, C, 2020, 4, 2025. When did the FDA grant clearance for pharmacogenomic testing?
And we're good on the
Polling question.
comments.
Polling questions open. Answers are rolling in. And for your sake of time, Vito, looks like the trend is set. So I will help you keep going. So you got a lot of information you want to get through. So basically 25% in 2005, 49% 2015, 2022 was, or 22% was 2020, and then 5% was 25. So percentage was 24, 49, 22, and 5.
All right, cool. So the answer was 2020. So the Human Genome Project, like I remember we talked about Watson early on in the lecture, that was like hours ago, 2003. Then in 2007, they actually did direct-to-consumer genetic kits that cost about $1,000. And then 5 years later, they dropped it almost like 10% of the price. It's only $100. Then, for whatever reason, in 2013, the FDA sent a cease and desist letters to all of these companies doing direct-to-consumers. Then FDA is like, you know what? I changed my mind. And in 2017, approved genetic health risk tests. In 2019, 26 million people worldwide had genetic testing by 4 leading direct-to-consumer companies. And then in 2020, they actually granted clearance. So there is a there is a website from Virginia Tech that has a website that says Gene Test or Not. It's an online tool to tell you whether you should get the testing for Alzheimer's disease. And if you answer those 4 questions, it'll tell you should you or should you not do it. Again, I'm just bringing this to your attention. So there is direct-to-consumer testing and traditional medical testing. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm an optometrist, but I'm also a fiduciary. I'm a broker. I have financial licenses in insurance and investments. So the best way I could describe this is like, do you do investing on yourself, or do you have a financial advisor? Do you do direct-to-consumer testing, or do you go traditional medical testing? So when you do it to yourself, you do a little cotton swab in your cheek or your tongue, or you do a blood sample, and then you get the results. And then you have to try to figure it out on your own. Or the doctor is going to be able to guide you through the whole process. Whichever one you decide is whatever you decide, but just know there's different types of testing that can be done. So now we got to talk about the insurance side of things. So I find this funny, or maybe it's not funny, but insurance companies discourage APOE testing. So I wonder, why is it that they discourage it? Is it because they don't want to pay for them to do the testing? Probably has to be a little reason, but who knows? The interesting part is that fewer than 200 CPT codes exist for about 70,000 genetic tests. 7 out of the 8 largest private payers reflect standards that discourage APO testing due to lack of clinical utility. So pretty much what they're saying is that, why would you want to get tested when there's nothing you can do about it? If you have Alzheimer's, okay, what are you going to do? You have Alzheimer's, right? But that's wrong thinking, because there are actually ways to actually minimize Alzheimer's disease. And I think I spoke about that last time in my first lecture last year. But anyways, APO testing may have an important clinical role, considering that disease-modifying therapies are under evaluation by the U.S. and Food and Drug Administration. All right. So again, this is in your notes, but just know that there's a lot of different areas or diagnostic and lab testings that you can go to. So if you wanted to check your mother effer gene, you can go to either Quest or LabCorp. And there's other studies. So the sleep study, I showed you one of them previous slides. There's another one called Novasome. I have no financial disclosures on anything here. So another one is Genova Diagnostic GI, just to check to see how your gastrointestinal is going on. There's a whole bunch of other ones that are out there. Just quick, I'm just going to touch on 23andMe. 23andMe was, if I'm not mistaken, it was like in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. Then they went public, and then in 2023 they had some data breach. And people's information was leaked out, and their genetics was leaked out. 23andMe went bankrupt, and I think a few months ago they were just rebought for a lower price tag. But 23andMe still exists out there. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. And again, there's a whole bunch. You could do your own valuation to see where it is. So here it is. Now, since I'm a sports guy, this is one that's cool. Nutrigenomics. There's one that does genetic testing for personalized nutrition if you're an athlete. Again, just know it exists. I don't have any disclosures on this. But exercise. If you exercise, what happens in your body and how does it affect your gene activity? Well, it's going to turn on or off different genes that helps burn fats and carbs in your body. Pretty cool stuff. Corneal dystrophies. I gotta go quick with this one, but Dr. Sorkin, he is a cornea optometrist. He works at Omni Eye Services. I actually lecture with him, and so he wrote an article in Modern Optometry. And obviously, the most common one that we normally see in office is EBMD. Oh, sorry, which is epithelial membrane dystrophy, and the most rare one, which I think the gentleman was asking about, was AMD genetic testing. The one that we see the least is actually macular corneal dystrophy. That's the rarest one to see, but when someone has that, it actually affects vision the most. So corneal dystrophies occur because there's something wrong with the cellular metabolism. It doesn't mean because someone has like high blood pressure or cholesterol. It's just cellular metabolism is causing the cornea to be warped or causing it to be blurry, or it has a scar and things of that nature. They're usually bilateral. And again, there's different categories. So again, we're going to go quick with this. Just know that they're obviously trying to come up with gene therapies or some type of regenerative therapies to try to help with any of these types of dystrophies that exist out there. So we already know the backgrounds, but the treatment, in my opinion, if someone were to have a corneal dystrophy, the last thing we want to do is a cornea transplant. That's like the end all be all of things. But in my opinion, if you have a corneal dystrophy and you're lacking vision, the treatment would be scleral lenses. However you treat it, but that would be scleral lenses to restore vision. And then depending on the type, if you have like Fuchs, then you want to put like Muro 128 on there to treat that cornea as well. That's just how I would treat it. Let's go a little bit faster here. So they did a study here. 2,900 families were tested about the prevalence of corneal dystrophies, and it's only about 1%. And there's genes that causes these dystrophies. The biggest one of the genes is called TGFB1 or I. So 62% of it is causing that corneal dystrophy. There's a book out there just on that specific section, TGFB1 related corneal dystrophies. And just I like history lesson. So that guy named Arthur in 1890 was the one who first described a corneal dystrophy in macular and granular corneal dystrophies. I was trying to find a photo on him, couldn't find. So this is one company that exists for corneal dystrophy testing. In 2008 was the first one ever to come out, was Avellino Labs. Then in 2010, it was Invitae, which is the picture that you see there. They were actually acquired in 2024 by LabCorp. So they would actually do a corneal dystrophy panel. They test 33 genes inside of it. So now you know where to send them if you want to get this testing done. Then 2019, Avogen came out, and just know there's about 40 plus labs. Pick one, whatever's closest to you or whatever's the cheapest, doesn't matter. There's another company out in Korea that is doing polymerase chain reaction running time for 3 hours on just checking out, blood samples and corneal samples for this type of things. Just wanted to bring to your attention that UCLA has their own cornea genetics lab in their ophthalmology. So their lab was selected in 2023 to be part of what's called the regeneration medicine for congenital hereditary endothelial dystrophies. And so just know that this exists out there. And the interesting part is that, remember I said the corneal transplant is the end all be all, like the last thing you want to do, the real reason is because for every one donor cornea available, for every 70 that are needed. So there's not enough cornea transplants to go around because in the eye banks, there's just not enough to go around. So we want to keep that cornea as healthy as we can, and scleral lenses gives that little bit of that nourishment with that liquid and tear reservoir as much as possible. Fuchs, I just found this wasn't interesting because look at this study in 2026. It just came out this month talking about lifestyle and nutritional intake. That's powerful. because people who have Fuchs have either hyperlipidemia or have atrial fibrillation. And they also had elevated intakes of zinc, manganese, and selenium was also observed. Pretty cool stuff. We already talked about the different dystrophies. You have epithelial, substromal, but there is something called the IC3D category. I'm not going to skip this. It's again TGF, just talking about the genetics, boring stuff. But this is the important. So IC3D classification. The first one was created in 2005, and they keep going with it. In 2015, the second edition came out, and now we're on the third edition. So on the new edition, the 2024 edition, there's 22 total number of corneal dystrophies. Okay. So real quick, there's 4 categories of it, just so you know it. It says that in category 1, the gene has been mapped and identified, and they know their mutations. Category 2 means it's been mapped, but they don't know where the gene remains. 3 means it's not mapped to the chromosome, and then these 4 is reserved or suspected. The reason why I'm going to detail on this is because watch, look at the next slide. It shows each different stromal or epithelial. It'll tell you what category it's in. So I find it interesting, or maybe to me it is, EBMD is the most common one that we see in practice, but yet it's C3. So what does C3 means? Go back. It has not been mapped to a chromosomal locus, but it's well defined. Let's go to macular corneal dystrophy, which is the rarest one that we can find. And it's the most affected to our vision, but it's a C1. C1, again, means that it's been mapped and identified and the mutation is known. So when it comes to corneal dystrophies, majority of the time, they don't really know what's happening, as you can see the categories. So each of these total to 22, and they, for whatever reason, they decide to remove this Grayson-Will branch corneal dystrophy. It's gone from the category. All right. What I find interesting, and in the chat, if you can help me out on this, because I'm confused. Keratoconus is a corneal dystrophy, but it's not listed in the category of corneal dystrophies. So if somebody can help me out there, I don't get it. So this just came out in 2025 of September. Genetics of keratoconus. It usually happens in the second, and so 20s and 30s usually happens. It needs to have these features. It needs to either have abnormal posterior corneal ectasia, irregular corneal thickness distribution, and clinical non-inflammatory corneal thinning. What I found even interesting is that Saudi Arabia is the leading people with actual keratoconus. But look here, 0.04 in the United States. I bet all of us have seen one type of keratoconus patients. You know how they say when it's rare, it's in your chair? So 0.04 in the United States, but yet we see keratoconus patients all the time. I find that interesting. Again, talking about genetics and the major gene determination. So if you have a first degree relative, you have about an increase of 67% chance of having keratoconus. So the United States, so if I do the math correctly, I got 5 minutes left. 2016, the prevalence in the United States of keratoconus was 0.03. 3 years later, it went to 0.04. So does that mean now we're on 0.06? I can only guess, right? Because there's no study telling me there's more than that at the moment. But look at this. Keratoconus is higher in the Black population, more so in females, and also coming in second is the Hispanic population. I'm Hispanic. So let's think logically for a moment. Which ethnicities eat the worst? It's the Black communities and the Hispanic communities. Why? Because the low socioeconomical areas eat the poorest food. So the question is eating poor foods causing keratoconus, or is you having keratoconus leading to a lack of vitamin and mineral deficiencies in the body? They don't know. Scientists don't know, right? But if you think logically, why is it more in Black and Hispanics? I would assume gotta be with food and vitamin and minerals. I'm just using logic. So look at this. In nutrients, I love how nutrients is talking about keratoconus, nutritional and metabolic imbalance in keratoconus. It is saying that nutritional and metabolic imbalance can deeply influence keratoconus initiation and progression. That's crucial, right? And what this study talks about vitamin D, vitamin A, B9, 12, C, and all the minerals there, okay? But again, their conclusion was that it remains unclear if these alterations are the primary cause of keratoconus. Okay. Serum vitamin D levels, this was interesting. If a patient with keratoconus, they had lower serum vitamin D levels than any of the people versus healthy controls. So remember I told you about vitamin D being defense? Keratoconus patients have lower vitamin D levels. I got 3 minutes left. I got to hurry. Cornea, this one's talking about vitamin D, B12, and folic acid. Remember, folic acid is vitamin B9. It says that vitamin B12 and folic acid, there was no change, or in calcium. But when it came to vitamin D, that one had a decreased vitamin D levels significantly increased in keratoconic patients. Talking about copper, decrease of copper levels in the diseased tissue have been reported when you have keratoconus. If you have any thyroid issues, the thyroid gland prevalence in keratoconus patients is 13.6 higher than the actual normal general population, right? And so where do you need iron to change T4 into T3? So just think about that logically for a second. Talking about the keratoconus candidate genes, there's 35 different genes. I'm gonna skip over this because it's boring. Just what's happening inside the eye. So remember I told you TGFB1 is the most common one when it came to corneal dystrophies. And look what happens. It leads to scar and fibrosis regulation inside of the cornea. And also, as you can see in the picture, all the different things that are happening when you have those certain genes in the cornea. If you notice real quickly, classification, uncertain significance on all of these. I got 2 minutes left. Keratoconus, linkage and loci. This was in 2019, the first study of DNA methylation changes in the human keratoconic cornea. That's why I went in huge detail on this. The reason why I gave you so much information is who knows when I'll speak to you again on genetics, because you don't hear these kind of lectures ever. Here's another one, genetic and molecular landscape of keratoconus. Again, talking about epigenetics and transcriptomic changes. All right, so here's the future directions in genetics and keratoconus. Currently, there's no gene therapy for keratoconus, right? And they are trying to figure out how AI can implement and get these deep learning machines to figure out the genetic sequences in our bodies and our eyes. I'm gonna go, because I got like a minute or two left. And since we're not retina specialists, they're gonna go to retina anyways. But myopia gene, just know, you ever notice like those little kids that are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old and they're like a -10? Well, the reason why they're a -10 is because they have what's called this ARR3 gene. And no, myopia management doesn't help with them if they have this type of gene, but just know it's something that exists. So these are all the genes that are in myopia, just using your notes. I just found it funny that there's a Sonic the Hedgehog gene. So some scientists wanted to name it Sonic the Hedgehog. Just know there's a Sonic the Hedgehog myopia gene. So again, which is a bunch of studies talking about myopia and glaucoma, genetic and genomic studies on glaucoma for the genetics of glaucoma. Primary congenital glaucoma, if you're born with it, then you have that certain gene causing that. Again, more on open angle glaucoma if you have that tiger gene. Inherited retinal diseases, which is very rare. The one that we most commonly see in our practice is retinitis pigmentosa. So Stargardt's disease is that macular dystrophy that we would have. That's the most debilitating one of them all. And then the other ones are really rare. So this is more so retina. You see it and you send it out the door, right? So just know that when it comes to these kind of all these ones here, there's 280 genes that are associated with those retinal diseases. Okay. So again, there's in retinitis pigmentosa, there's about 80 genes and things are getting mutated. And look, this is highly debated, but on the treatment, it says vitamin A, 15,000 IU per day. Again, some say yes, some say no. I think early research was on that. Again, more on genetics on that. Let me see, I'm gonna skip because I'm out of time. I'm gonna go to the important part. Just know that they came out with an FDA approved treatment for one of the retinal, the intraretinal the IRDs here. So it's called Luxturna. RPE65 gene, just know that's one of our genes that gives us our vision. Okay, so it's a working copy to give us our vision back in there. When it comes to AMD, there's this implant that they actually created to restore vision with people with geographic atrophy. And I think I got 2 more slides. There's a new light therapy. I just wanted to bring to your attention that light therapy here for dry AMD. So there's some retina specialists that are doing this, and it's using light therapy to try to heal people with AMD. And here's a study of a double mass randomized control study, which is the creme de la creme of studies. So when they got this treatment, they immediately gained 4 letters after the treatment, which was pretty cool, after just 1 month and also at month 7. And then talking about photobiomodulation, this is big in our industry now, you know, when it comes to skincare and all that stuff. So I'm on my last slide. So again, nobody's going to care about your brain more than you, obviously, right? And for your patients, you are the gateway to help people live a better life, right? Because we already know the primary care doctors are not doing this stuff. We got to be the ones to get them to the right targets. Know that there's scanners out there that exist to help figure out what levels they have. If you need any conversation on that, you could always give me an email or a conversation about different scanners that exist. These are just different resources you can use and go to. The biggest one, obviously, I'm not a president or I'm not anything of the society. I am just a member. And so I just thought it was kind of cool that I was wearing an Irish shirt and I matched the review of Optometry Wellness Essentials magazine there. So I truly appreciate the time that you gave me. I'm sorry I went a little quick. I did have a lot of information for you guys. And Dr. Salka, I'm sorry I don't have a photo with you. Otherwise, I'd put you in there. But
No worries, we'll get it next time.
all right, beautiful. So again, I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time that you all gave me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I do want to take a dive. I just want to point out to everyone here that this little red dot is up. You can take that survey. I do want to jump back to Peter's question here, where it says your opinion on the, macular risk, genetic testing. Why do ophthalmologists? I'll give my opinion, and you can weigh in.
Sure.
Why do they poo-poo this test? Is that I genetically test in the practice. Do I genetically test everyone? I let people know that it's, people come in and say, hey, my mom had macular degeneration. I hear there's a test out there. And I tell them, I say, look, we can test for you, but you have to have the mindset if it's high, medium, or low. It doesn't mean low, you're not going to get it, and high means you are going to get it. It's just these genetic SNPs that, Vito went so well and covered. That means you have the risk. You have the SNPs, whether it's high, medium, or low. Now it's whether or not they're going to do anything with their lifestyle. Or do they have 3 out of the 5 of the metabolic syndrome? Are they exercising? Are they sleeping well? That Vito so well covered. And I say, look, I don't mind genetically testing you, but if we do find something, are you willing to change something to help stack the deck in your favor? So I think the reason why they poo-poo it is that it's could be an expensive test. It doesn't tell them whether they're going to get it or not, and it takes a lot of conversation once you get the test. I like doing it and helping people out. I do the finger scanner. I know about sleep, all these different aspects that can cause genes to express. I don't mind talking about it, but I think it's the uncomfortableness of it and the more time in the chair once you get the test back. And then, someone might not ever do any of those things that you talk about, and they go, oh, well, I didn't get macular degeneration anyway. So it's not telling you whether you're going to get it or not. I think it just creates confusion and extra chair time in some people's eyes. I like doing it so I can help people out. But Vito, go ahead and.
No, I think I agree with you 100%. So not necessarily to this one, but for example, some of the primary care physicians don't even know about certain tests, So when it comes to, like, let's say the Alzheimer's disease test, some of them don't even know that even exists to even tell them about it. So a lot of times doctors are just skeptical about it because, again, if you find out if you have it, what are you going to do about it, kind of, right? Because they're in the monitor. Most ophthalmologists are, okay, come back to me when you have a problem, right? It's because they want to do a laser treatment on you. They're going to get paid to do a laser treatment. They don't want you to be healthy. Doctors want you to be healthy, but they don't want you. They're ophthalmologists. They pay for surgery and treatments. So they are in the industry of sick care, not healthcare. And that's the sad truth. All doctors are not in healthcare anymore. We are sadly in sick care. Our job is to revamp that. And that's why you guys, all of you, I appreciate you being on this call because you paid to be on this lecture. And then you'll let me know if this was the best genetic lecture of your life, because this is actually something that how does it tie in all the genetic stuff that I taught you? And now the mission is not just to teach it. Now it's you to not only implement it to yourselves, but also for your patients' lives. Because at the end of the day, who cares about your patient? You got to care about you first. And then once you're good to go, you're going to talk to your patients about it. So again, the big one is cost as well, but I think that's the biggest one. So hopefully I answered it pretty well.
I think we did well there. So
I
with that said,
want to thank you, Vito. I thought that was a lot of good information, and you have a tremendous grasp of it all. So thank you so much for doing that for us.
Yeah, without a doubt. Do I stop my share?
Yes.
I'm already sharing, I believe. So I believe
Oh, okay,
I'm
cool.
sharing with the
Perfect.
audience. And I already showed them where the little red dot was. It could be answering the question. For the sake of time and for the 3 minutes, please reach out to me, reach out to Vito. We're both into the kind of the functional medicine side of things, preventative, not just disease management. I can do disease management. I've been doing it for 30 years. And then over the last, 6 or 8 years, I've been doing functional medicine and folding that in. And I think that's confusing out there, but that's why we hold these different lectures to help open up the eyes to that part of the, as Vito said, healthcare. So with that said, questions have been answered. Thank you, Vito, for being here. This was Unlocking Your Genetic Potential, Nutritional Eye Health Edition. This was a synchronous virtual course, part of our national webinar series. Thanks, everyone, for attending. This will end the education for now.